of course, the headline figure looks really good. 0.55% recovery in the country's gross domestic product for the second quarter this year. That's the headline. But when we start to unpack it, looks a little bit like what you call a Christmas gift box. You know that when you do that opening on the Boxing Day, the 26th of December, a very big box looking very beautiful and well wrapped may not have as much as that expensive gift that you thought was inside. Sometimes that's how the GDP looks like. So the headline looks very attractive to everyone, but until the Boxing Day and the day after, you start opening the boxes for those who do, then you know what to say really in the box. So we now open the GDP box since Monday, Tuesday. Then we're still digging deep and trying to find where the strong elements and the weak ones are. So for what we have on the street, it's not yet out of recession if we go by a number of sectoral analysis. So that's what Tajuddin Ibrahim, the head of research at Chapel Hill, Denham, is here to do with us. Of course, Chapel Hill, Denham is one of Nigeria's investment bank, as an investment securities firm as well, and they do a very strong research analysis. That is not an advertorial, in case you're going to pay for that. Good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you. Okay. Yes, you've seen the headlines, and we're now unpacking it. And thank you for this set of charts that you've, pie charts, the rest of them that you've put together. So we'll look at the services sector, and I'm sure you read from your colleagues,
yes.
From APN Quest and others that look. What's the problem here? The agriculture looks good on the surface, but when we begin to unpack trade and services, we're not really out of recession, so to speak.
Yes, we really are not, particularly with respect to the services sector. So if you take a look at the entire pie, what you'll find is the services sector accounting for 54% of the GDP. The industries and the agriculture account for about 23% each. So which means for us to really get out of recession, we need to really pay more attention to the services sector. And if you take a look at the growth in the numbers in Q2, we have the agri sector growing by 3.0%, the industries growth of 1.5%, and services sector was down by 0.8%. That is why we saw such a tiny growth of 0.55.
So that pie chart, I love the word pie. I don't know why they tie it to pie, but it looks like a pie. Then you begin to cut it. So I got 54% on the left side. I got 23%. Then I got 23%. So that looks like if we take these two others, we're just in the water. That's taking me to the bottom right page on the screen there, isn't it?
That's very correct. So
the services sector was a major drag on this GDP number.
It was a major drag, and it speaks to a lot of factors. One of them being the FX problem that we have, that let me say we are getting out of. So we ran into that problem about a year plus ago, and we delayed, or let me say the authority delayed in solving that problem. And this is partly why I say the current situation as a lesson for the authority that when you have major economic problem, such as the one that we had around FX, you should solve it very quickly. And these are the pictures that we see in terms of the outcome of delaying in solving such problems. So services is a key sector, and in as much as it is either slow or in the negative territory, we will not be talking about a strong recovery of the Nigerian economy. Rather, we'll probably be talking about a sluggish one, or a crawling way, or let me say like a rocky way to recovery for the economy as a whole.
So when we say services sector, and what do we have in the services sector? I can point to one really, which is ICT. Yes, I know that's services.
Yes, it is. But there are key sectors key subsectors that we have.
You're taking us to the bigger chart.
So the bigger chart here shows us the trade subsector, for instance, accounts for the chunk of services, which is 32%. And if you take a look also at the information and communication...
Hold on a second, I'm going to keep cutting in there. My apologies, you got to explain here. You're the one who knows the numbers. I'm just to ask questions. I'm looking at that size of the pie. If that's what comes to me, if we are sharing this pie, like an apple pie or meat pie or whatever, chicken pie, what is in that trade?
So in
that 32%.
So in trade we have businesses that deal in importation, they import electronics, they import clothing materials, they import all sorts of goods.
Toothpicks?
Anything that they import that is not banned in terms of importation as far as Nigerian laws are concerned. So they import such into the country and sell. Also, there are some locally manufactured goods that are also in there, sold in the Nigerian market. So that is where, the bulk of, the trade that we're talking about is
technically foreign trade.
Foreign trade partly, local trade partly as well. And speaking also about even agri. So whatever you produce, you've gotten to sell them in the market. So that is value addition to agri, not so much of the output. So value addition on that front also slowed. So
I got it.
So
agro-allied.
Yes.
Agro-processing, for example.
Correct.
Yes.
So
storage, warehousing.
Correct. So those are the services that we have, or the businesses that we have inside trade.
So if we're looking at a GDP that folks believe don't affect them or their lives, this is exactly one area we should be looking at.
It is. It is an area we should be looking at, and it's an area that the government should look to promote more. And we are seeing some sort of improvement. In Q2, for instance, it slowed by about 1.3%, but that is a lot better than what we had in Q1 when it contracted by about 3%. And it speaks partly to what the CBN did with respect to intervening in the FX market. Because some businesses, small and medium, largely speaking, were unable to import raw materials to produce goods and to produce their goods. Some were unable to import readily produced goods to sell because they could not access the FX market. They didn't have access to FX supply. It was low, or probably, let me say, hard to come by. So that had an impact. But when the CBN intervened in the second quarter of this year, largely speaking in April, when they renewed their intervention, we began to see an improvement when they opened several windows, the NAFEX window, the PTA window, or what have you, manufacturing window, or whatever. So we had more confidence in the market. From a foreign investment standpoint, foreign investors brought more dollars into this country, supporting the supply of the CBN into the market. So that began to partly influence the trade sector for Q2. So the contraction that we saw of about 1.3% is not encouraging, but we should bear in mind we were coming from a contraction of about 3% in the first quarter of this year.
Okay, so we shouldn't beat ourselves too much. Let's move
all.
on to the next one. I'm still with the big pie. We're done with the chocolate side. I'm holding a black and white copy of it here. Yeah, but I still remember that's the biggest size, no matter the color. Then we have the 23%. What subsector is that holding 23% of this pie?
That is the information and communication sector.
Oh, yeah, the telecommunications.
So that speaks to what we saw, because in a period of recession, what you find is a case where almost every consumer cuts back on what they consume. So what you probably may not really cut back on what you consume is food. But you usually can cut back on the number of calls you make daily.
SMS?
You can cut SMS, you can cut back on SMS.
Browsing?
You can cut back on browsing, data usage on the internet. So those are the factors that really affected that sector.
Or you can just flash and say, call me back.
Flashing
was a lot.
Just so that you save your money in a difficult environment. So subscribers base, for instance, in the second quarter of this year, slowed by about 4.5%, according to the NCC data. And also, internet usage saw some contraction of about 0.6% year-on-year in Q2. Those two key factors speak to the contraction that we saw in the information and communication sector in the second quarter.
Thank you very much.